The Prime Minister says he's cautiously optimistic of getting a Brexit deal. Boris Johnson will travel to Luxembourg on Monday for his first meeting since taking office with the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and the EU's chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier. At an event in Rotherham today, he told an audience there is the rough shape of an agreement beginning to form. Here's our deputy political editor, John Pienaar.
The name's Boris Johnson. Trust me. It looks like campaigning, and it is, for future votes and for trust that he's the one to deliver Brexit. No more delays. An exciting time, he told one supporter.
Worrying time.
Not exciting, worrying, she said.
I think it's absurd.
Maybe worrying for him too, wanting a Brexit deal, attacked by critics for closing the Commons.
I'm all in favour of our MPs.
Why are you not with them in Parliament? Sort
Would
out
you-
the mess that you have created. Get back to Parliament and sort it out.
He's being heckled by the Commons Speaker too, who's warned of more laws to ban a no-deal Brexit, maybe force another extension.
Whatever the shenanigans that may be going on at Westminster, we will get on with delivering our agenda and preparing to take this country out of the EU on October the 31st.
What chance of a deal? He's hoping for a last-minute breakthrough.
I'm cautiously optimistic. How is that a good enough characterisation, Paul, of where we are? I'm cautiously optimistic.
He'll meet the EU Commission President in Luxembourg on Monday, still a long way from agreement.
Yes, we had a very good
His
meeting.
Democratic Unionist allies want to be convinced by a Brexit deal they see as no threat to the Union, and they haven't been.
We're not going to vote for any arrangement which makes us different than the rest of the United Kingdom and as a result forms a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom.
As far as the Irish government is concerned, our position hasn't changed, but I have to say what's been put forward so far falls very far short of what we would need.
So the chances of a deal still seem remote, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. It would certainly help Boris Johnson out of a tight political corner. If he's forced to extend Brexit, he could expose the Tories to a potentially serious threat from the Brexit Party. And now there's a law that could virtually outlaw a no-deal Brexit. Wanting a deal, even needing one, won't necessarily make it happen.
Good luck with Brexit, sir.
Where there's a political will, there's often a political way. But no one has found it yet. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
The Metropolitan Police has ended its criminal investigation into the campaign group Leave.EU over its spending during the 2016 Brexit referendum. The inquiry began after the Electoral Commission referred the campaign, founded by the businessman Aaron Banks, to the police and fined it £70,000. But the Met now says there's insufficient evidence to justify further action. Mr Banks has called for an inquiry into the Electoral Commission's actions, and a separate investigation by the National Crime Agency into other allegations is ongoing. Well, it seems a general election isn't too far away, with Downing Street insisting it's the only way to break the Brexit deadlock in Parliament. The earliest it could take place is towards the end of November. Our chief political correspondent Vicky Young takes a look at some of the key constituencies that could determine the result.
We're in a period of pretty unpredictable politics, and the current makeup of the House of Commons suggests a general election may not be that far away. Let's take a look at the state of the parties right now. The Conservatives have 288 MPs and Labour 247. There are 35 independents, more than half of them former Conservative MPs booted out of the parliamentary party for voting against the government. The SNP has 35 and the Liberal Democrats 17. With all the others, that's a total of 650, and no party is anywhere near the required 326 for an overall majority. So what's likely to be the Tories' election strategy? Well, in 2017, the two main parties dominated, the Tories taking 43% and Labour 41% of the vote. Compare that to how the parties are polling now. The Conservatives have had a poll bounce under Boris Johnson, but are still averaging around 33%. Labour are down to about 26% in September's polls. So let's take a look at the electoral map from 2017. If the current polls were reflected in a general election, the Conservatives would take 24 seats off Labour, places like Kensington, Dudley North and Newcastle-under-Lyme. But at the same time, they risk losing seats. Places like Stirling and Gordon in Scotland would likely go to the SNP. Cheltenham, Southport and Winchester to the Liberal Democrats. So the Conservatives need to take more seats from Labour, and they'll have their eyes on the ones that voted for Brexit. Looking at the Conservatives' top 50 Labour-held targets, it's estimated that 39 voted Leave. Places like Stoke-on-Trent North with a 72% Leave vote, Blackpool South 68% or Great Grimsby 71% Leave. But will historical anti-Tory feeling here undermine this strategy? That'll be one of the key features of an election. And the other unknown is the potential impact of Nigel Farage's Brexit party. Could it damage the Tories' chances by winning the support of Leave voters?
Vicky Young there. Let's talk to our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, who's at Westminster. John, David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, who of course held the Brexit referendum in 2016, is now breaking his silence on the current Brexit impasse.
And how, Clive, we've seen past Prime Ministers take pot shots at their successors, but never anything quite like this. David Cameron's about to release his memoirs, and he's given a brutally plain-spoken interview to The Times. In the book, he describes his now former friend, Michael Gove, the Cabinet Minister for No Deal Planning, as mendacious, a liar, in other words. He describes him and Boris Johnson as having left the truth at home during the EU referendum campaign, having behaved appallingly, and he's scathing about the decision to expel rebels from the parliamentary party and stop them standing as candidates. And as for suspending Parliament, he calls that sharp practice, a sort of old-fashioned term for trickery, for cheap trickery. Now, this is a row of a kind we haven't quite seen before. It compounds the row that's going on just at the moment. And we're now looking at a former Prime Minister attacking the present Prime Minister on top of another former Prime Minister, John Major, challenging Boris Johnson in court. Has there ever been a Prime Minister as polarising and divisive as the one we're seeing now in modern times? It's true that those closest to Boris Johnson in number 10 Downing Street believe these divisions may work for him and help convince Brexiteer voters that Mr Johnson is on their side. But if the Prime Minister hoped to deliver what some have called a clean break Brexit and to reunify the country afterwards, well, surely now achieving either one of those ambitions, let alone both of them, looks like an uphill slog.
OK, John, thank you. John Pienaar there at Westminster.